Today we're going to talk about the dative case. The dative case is probably one of the harder things that we will take a look at this year, and it gets a little complicated. So let's start at the beginning and think back to the nominative case. Remember, the nominative case is just a fancy way of saying the subject of the sentence. We've reviewed the accusative case. Remember, that's for direct objects and for dog foo. Remember, direct objects answer the question what. I'm buying a chair. I buy what? Chair. I have a brother. I have what? Brother. That direct object is always in the accusative case. The dative case is for indirect objects. Now, how do you figure out what is an indirect object? An indirect object answers the question to whom or for whom. So it's going to be often used with words like buy or give. For example, I'm buying you a car. I buy what? Car, direct object. For whom am I buying the car? For you. Or a sentence like, I'll give you $1. I give what? Dollar. To whom am I giving the dollar? To you. That's an indirect object. So indirect objects are more often than not going to be a pronoun or a noun that's a person, like I'm giving the man, I'm giving the woman, lots of pronouns. I'm giving him, I'm giving her. So we're going to take a look at those three instances. But first we need to review the chart. So a masculine noun used as a subject is der. A neuter noun used as a subject is das. A feminine noun used as a subject is die. And plural nouns are also die. Remember, the accusative case was fairly easy because the only one that's going to change are the masculines. A masculine noun used as a direct object is den, and all the rest stay the same. But what about indirect objects? Masculine nouns used as an indirect object become dame. Neuter nouns also become dame. Feminine nouns become der, and plural nouns become dane. Now the reason why I have these two circled is because this is where it gets a little tricky sometimes, because it's the first time that the feminines and the plurals part company. Up until this point, feminines and plurals have always been the same. In the indirect object dative case, that will no longer work. Let's take a look at this chart. I think this makes it easier to memorize the chart if you think about it in pronouns. See how the genders match up with their pronoun counterparts. So der is er, dane is een, dame is ihm, he, him, him, it, eem. So look how the M matches up with that M. The S matches up with that S. If it stays the same as a gender, it stays the same as a pronoun. The plurals, the feminines would be like she, her, her. D stays D, so Z stays Z, and der becomes ear. This is where they split company again. The feminines and the plurals will no longer match, only in the dative case. So D stays D, and Z stays Z. And ihnen, that en, matches up with the dane. I hope that makes sense because it makes it so much easier to memorize if you think of it that way. So here are the pronouns. Like I said, indirect objects are usually a person, so we're going to have to know the pronouns. So this is I, me, mir, ich, mich, mir, you, you, du, dich, dir. Subject, direct object, indirect object. He, him, him. Er, ihn, ihm. Think about the chart. Der, dane, dame. She, her, her. Sie, ihr. Die, der. Es, ihm. It, it. We, us, us. Wir, uns, uns. They, them, them. Sie, sie, ihnen. Think of the plurals here. Die, dane. These two will always be the same. The formal you and the they will be the same, only they're capitalized. And ihr, euch, euch. I always think of a little pig. Ihr, euch, euch. Okay, so just like with the accusative case, we had to add on that dog food component, right? So accusative case was used for direct objects, but they were also used for prepositional phrases that start with durch, ohne, gegen, für, There are these prepositions that require the dative case, and we will get more into those in a different lecture. There are also a third element to the dative case, which are these dative verbs. These verbs require the object to be in the dative case, even if it's a direct object. They're special verbs, they're called dative verbs, and they require the object to be dative, even if it's a direct object. And we will also get more into those in a separate lecture, although I am going to give you an overview of all of them. So now we know that the dative case is used for indirect objects. Remember, that answers the question to whom or for whom. Dative pronouns. We will take a closer look at those in a later lecture. Dative prepositions. There are 8 of them. And dative verbs. It's a lot. So, just as an overview, here are some examples of the different ways we're going to use the dative case. This is the dative case for indirect objects. These are things that answer the question to whom or for whom. I'm giving her a dog. I give what? Dog. This must be in the accusative case. To whom am I giving the dog? Her. This must be in the dative case. Ich gebe ihr einen Hund. They are buying my parents a house. They buy what? A house, direct object. For whom are they buying the house? My parents. This is a tricky one because it's a plural, and dative plurals are always tricky. So it would be meinen Eltern because the plurals go die, dane. Eine, en. So we have to pick up that en and put it on our possessive adjective. We are giving them the books. We give what? Books. Accusative. To whom are we giving them? Them. That has to be dative. Wir geben ihnen Bücher. Okay, even though we haven't specifically talked about the dative prepositions, I want to show you how they work. They work just like the dog food prepositions, except they're going to have the dative case. I live with them. With them is the dative preposition. Mit says I have to have that pronoun be in the dative case. Ihnen. He's coming out of the house. That is not a... kommt aus dem Haus. It is das Haus. So aus dem man, aus says I'm a dative prep, so this has to be dative. Aus dem Haus. I am at the supermarket. At the supermarket is your prepositional phrase, and the preposition is by. By is one of the dative prepositions, so it's der markt, so it becomes dem markt. Here are some sentences with dative verbs. The object of this dative verb has to be in the dative case. Die Hose steht dir gut. The pants look good on you. I believe her. Ich glaube ihr. That pleases me, or I like that. Das gefällt mir. Now, I know that was a lot of information in a very short amount of time. We're going to take each of these items separately in separate lectures and practices. I just really wanted to give you an overview of the dative case. Remember, it's primarily used for indirect objects. There are 8 prepositions that require the dative case, and there are a handful of dative verbs that require their objects to be in the dative case.